The American Legion is proud to bestow its highest honor on our next guest. She has quite a resume. In addition to service as the U.S. Secretary of Labor, U.S. Secretary of Transportation, Director of the Office of Public Liaison, and Commissioner of the Federal Trade Commission, she was elected as a U.S. Senator for North Carolina in 2002. She served as President of the American Red Cross from 1991 to 1999. While her devotion to charity is legendary, veterans are one of her very top priorities. Married to longtime Senator and World War II veteran Robert Dole, she not only understands the issues facing the caregivers of our heroes, she has lived it. In fact, she established the Elizabeth Dole Foundation in order to bring attention and assistance to the group of often forgotten family members who work tirelessly to improve the quality of life for their heroic loved ones. The Elizabeth Dole Foundation made a critical difference in the expansion of the benefits to pre-9/11 veteran caregivers so that they are equal to those who serve the current generation. Like the American Legion family, the Elizabeth Dole Foundation believes that all generations of veterans and their families deserve our support, regardless of the era in which they served. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to present the American Legion Distinguished Service Medal to former Senator, former Secretary, and lifelong humanitarian Elizabeth Dole.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much. Before we get started, let me pause and reflect on the passing of two dear friends and colleagues, both Legionnaires, Senators Paul Laxalt and John McCain. They were both true servant leaders and heroes on and off the battlefield. And I'm sure you agree, they will be sorely missed. Commander Rowan, thank you for that wonderful introduction, and thank you for this enormous honor. You and your tremendous team are making such a significant impact every single day in the lives of our veterans and their families. I'm so grateful that you made family first the theme of your command. And if I may say so, you, Commander, are an inspiration to countless young women across America who may be thinking about serving their country. Thank you for your service and your strong leadership. Now, as many of you know, I'm married to a Legionnaire. Last month, Bob celebrated his 95th birthday. Can you believe it? And he still spends many Saturday mornings greeting veterans at the National World War II Memorial. You know, the American Legion was instrumental in the creation of that memorial. If you haven't been there in a while, we're taking good care of it. The memorial is a powerful, magnificent tribute to those, many of them legionnaires, who fought so heroically to save the free world. The Legion in each of you represents a proud tradition older than the country itself, a tradition of selfless, courageous individuals willing to join the ranks and serve. Patriots such as you won our nation's freedom, twice brought peace to a warring world, defended vast oceans and violent skies, and fought in frozen reservoirs, thick jungles, dust-filled deserts, and sheer mountain ranges. In times of peace, you spurred technological innovation. You built feats of engineering and rode the rockets that launched America toward a new frontier. And when disaster has struck, whether at home or abroad, you have put yourselves at great personal risk to deliver food, aid, and invaluable hope to the hardest to reach places. The American Legion keeps alive the precious ideal that the truest leaders are also public servants. It is an ideal that was formative to our democracy and remains critical to its survival. Servant leaders are not driven by power. They are driven by a call to serve. Their motivation is echoed in how President Lyndon Johnson described the presidency when he said, "The burden of the president's responsibility literally opens up his soul. No longer can he accept matters as given. No longer can he write off hopes and needs as impossible." Servant leaders take on causes bigger than themselves. Theodore Roosevelt Jr. articulated this very principle when he withdrew his nomination to lead the American Legion at your first national convention. Roosevelt proclaimed, "We are gathered together for a very high purpose. I want every American through the length and breadth of this land to realize that there is not a man in this caucus who is seeking anything for himself personally, but that he is simply working for the good of the entire situation." Yes, let's do. His father, our 26th president, put an even finer point on that sentiment when he wrote, "There must be shame at the thought of shirking the hard work of the world." Leaders who act as public servants see the humanity in others. They take time to understand each other, appreciate each other. They look beyond political parties and see the good in one another. President Lincoln was a model of this respectful nature. He once admonished a group he heard disparaging Southerners by warning, "Don't criticize them. They are just what we would be under similar circumstances." President Calvin Coolidge also urged us to embrace competing thoughts and experiences. In addressing the American Legion's convention in 1925, President Coolidge remarked that differences in opinion are elements of strength rather than weakness. They broaden our vision, strengthen our understanding, encourage the true humanities, and enrich our whole mode and conception of life. Leaders who acknowledge the humanity of others build people up rather than cut them down. This approach opens doors to greater compromises and collaborations across party lines. Inevitably, servant leaders are more effective at solving our nation's biggest challenges. Servant leaders are also humble and willing to accept the consequences of their decisions. On the eve of the D-Day invasion, General Eisenhower drafted a statement to be released if the invasion failed. In it, he wrote, "If any blame or fault attaches to the attempt, it is mine and mine alone." In the final analysis, that is what great leaders do. They don't pass the responsibility or blame to someone else. They stand ready to make the hard decisions and to live with failure or success. To their core, servant leaders focus more on the legacy of their country and its people ahead of their own. Clara Barton, the founder of the American Red Cross, dedicated her life to caring for wounded service members, as you know. Reflecting on what it means to serve others, she once said, "You must never so much as think whether you like it or not, whether it is bearable or not. You must never think of anything except the need and how to meet it." There have been times when this sense of service is felt in short supply among our nation's leaders, but I've always maintained my faith in Americans and their willingness to stand in support of each other. My work with the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, and specifically with America's military and veteran caregivers, reinforces that faith every day. 5.5 million Americans care for a wounded, ill, or injured service member or veteran. The vast majority of these young spouses, mothers, dads, siblings, and other loved ones are not professional social workers or healthcare providers. Yet they have dedicated their lives to this new role, administering medications, performing at-home medical procedures, preventing triggers that can set off an extended emotional response, and dressing, bathing, and tending to the personal hygiene of their loved ones. Living up to the words of Clara Barton, these hidden heroes do not dwell on whether the responsibility is bearable. They simply focus on doing what is needed. Experts estimate that veteran caregivers provide nearly $14 billion a year as an unpaid workforce. $14 billion. On top of everything else, caregivers usually assume responsibility for the household, paying the bills, handling legal and financial challenges, and raising children. Caring for a wounded veteran is complicated and all-consuming. And ladies and gentlemen, it takes an enormous toll. Caregivers experience elevated rates of isolation, depression, physical ailments, family strain, and financial and legal troubles. The veteran caregiver crisis is a societal issue that requires a national response. That's why the Elizabeth Dole, thank you, a national response. That's why the Elizabeth Dole Foundation has built a national coalition of more than 300 organizations, including the American Legion and the Auxiliary, to introduce new services and programs that empower, strengthen, and honor our veteran caregivers. It's why we recruited Hollywood's biggest star, Tom Hanks, to chair our Hidden Heroes Awareness Campaign, which has introduced veteran caregivers to the nation. It's why we put our faith in a fabulous Legionnaire, Val Nicholas, to orchestrate a partnership with Comcast NBC Universal that has brought our campaign into nearly every home in America. It's why we've built a strong partnership with the Department of Veterans Affairs. The VA remains crucial to the health and well-being of our veterans and their families, as you know, and our nation owes a debt of gratitude to the American Legion for being the force behind its creation. It's why we established a bipartisan military and veteran caregiver caucus on Capitol Hill, which proved that issues can still rise above political divides. And the support we generated was critical to our recent historic success, again in partnership with the Legion. Are you seeing a theme here? In pushing for Congress to pass the Mission Act that expanded eligibility for the veteran caregiver stipend beyond post-9/11 caregivers to caregivers of all war eras. Finally, all caregivers will have equal access to this vital resource, regardless of when their loved ones served. I am so grateful we had the full support of the American Legion on that initiative. Together with our partners, we've made tremendous progress, but there's much more work to be done. Each of you in your posts can do your part to assist the veteran caregivers in your community through our Hidden Heroes cities. This program challenges leaders of cities large and small to proactively find and connect with local military and veteran caregivers. This is critical because many caregivers go about their work in isolation. At the same time, we count on these cities to survey and publicize local services and resources that can help caregivers manage their many responsibilities. Just yesterday, we celebrated commitments from the mayor and other leaders of both Minneapolis and St. Paul. You can learn if your city is a Hidden Heroes city by visiting our state-of-the-art website, hiddenheroes.org. If you don't see your community on the list, please contact us to help secure their commitment. If they are on the list, please make sure your post gets involved. Thank you again for this tremendous honor. Before arriving today, I read over the list of previous award recipients. I was not surprised to find my old boss, President Ronald Reagan, or as he might be better known around here, Legionnaire Ronald Reagan of Pacific Palisades Post 283. President Reagan was the epitome of a servant leader. In fact, he chose to share the end of his life with the nation so that we might better know the difficult road traveled by those caring for a loved one. As the president said his long goodbye, Nancy Reagan endured a caregiver journey familiar to the millions of Americans caring for veterans. There were long valleys of sadness, wishing for the old days. There were occasional peaks when life seemed a little like it used to be. The president had professional round-the-clock care, but it pained Nancy to leave his side. She felt anxiety and guilt, but most of all, she felt an overwhelming love for her husband and wanted to be there for him. Lunches with friends were cut short. Telephone calls were brief. As the president struggled with the effects of the disease, she became more isolated with him. She fiercely protected her husband and the way the nation remembered him, strong, wise, and unmatched in wit. The president foresaw Nancy's difficult journey. Ever the loving husband, President Reagan's letter to the nation included a plea for America's support. I only wish there was some way I could spare Nancy from this painful experience, he wrote. When the time comes, I am confident that with your help, she will face it with faith and courage. Like Nancy Reagan, America's military and veteran caregivers assumed their role with faith and courage, but their health and well-being and the well-being of their children and their wounded loved one heavily rely on the nation standing by their sides. Thank you, Commander Rowan, and thank you, Legionnaires, for supporting America's Hidden Heroes. Thank you for dedicating yourselves to your country, to your fellow Americans, and to causes bigger than yourselves. Thank you for living the words of Lincoln and Johnson, Reagan and Roosevelt. And thank you for continuing the tradition of servant leadership that has shaped our nation and made the United States the greatest country the world has ever known. God bless each and every one of you. God bless this great land of the free, America. Thank you so very much.